Today I'm doing trim on the last of the windows that I can do on the main floor that isn't the kitchen window because that one needs tile. I've gotten all the rest of them done and I have a pretty nice little system that I thought I might like to share with you guys, and maybe you'll find it helpful for what you're doing. Starts pretty straightforward. I've already decided what sort of reveal I like, and for me that's a 1/4 inch. So I've got my fancy looking metal tool here that's giving me a 1/4 inch reveal, and I mark that all around in a few places. Now you can use a 1/4 inch, you can use 3/16, you can use 2 1/8. Doesn't matter. All that really matters when it comes to choosing your reveal is, do you think it looks good and can you repeat it? So if you don't have one of these nice fancy tools that makes repeating it really easy, I'll put at the end of a video a way to make a template for whatever size you want to use, and then you'll be set. Make sure you get both sides of the corners here. So I'm marking in the middle and the corners and the middle all the way around because trim comes and it gets warpy, and I like to be able to make sure that my trim is an equal distance, that's my reveal, all the way around. And when it gets to the time to actually install the trim, you'll be able to see what I mean by trim is warpy and why I'm bothering to put them in the middle. So there we go. I've got a 1/4 inch marked all the way around. And the next step for me is to get a general idea of how long these pieces need to be, just to make it that I can run up and down the stairs to the miter saw a little bit less. And the way that I do that is I say, okay, we're about 46. I don't care. We can add 2 1/4 inches, one for there, one for there. That gives me about 46.5. And then with the trim that I'm using, it's 3 inches wide. And as long as you are cutting a 45 and not doing anything weird other than that, all I have to do is say I'm adding my width and add those to what I had already gotten for here, which makes it 46.5 plus 3 gives me 52.5. And I can take out that pause with a little bit of editing. So I'm at 52.5. We will cut to 53 or 54 by 22.5 plus 6 is 28.5, so we'll go 30. So I get 2 at 54 and 2 by 30. One of the great things about buying a small, light, cheap miter saw is that it's small, light, and it's cheap. One of the bad things is my stops for 45 are not really accurate. You can see how I've got a much bigger gap here than I do here. So every time I'm doing trim, I have to come along and I have to say, okay, we're gonna fuss this. The funny thing is, even when I had a $700 Bosch miter saw, that wasn't even any better for true, for square, and the stops weren't any better. So I still had to do that for that one too. This is just to say, if you have a very cheap, very light, very portable miter saw, you can still do some really, really great trim work as long as you take time to calibrate it before you get to work every day. All right, there we go. So don't feel bad if you want to buy cheap tools. Just make sure you know where they're going to fail you. Now you'll probably see in various YouTubes around that what you want to do is you want to measure from your inside corner to your inside corner, because that's where you put your marks. There's a very easy way around this, and that's what I'm going to be showing in this video. Because I've measured my outside corners, I can say, all right, these ones need to be 53 on the outside corner. Doesn't need to be very precise because it's going to get cut again. And we're just going to check and make sure that from there we can still get 29, and we're definitely good. So we can cut this one anywhere around here as long as we're not like too short. So if I want to grab an extra inch here, that's totally fine. This will work perfectly for me. And then we can do the same for this one, getting my 29 around there. And you'll notice that I'm not even caring to line these up, because 29 gives me a little bit of room to play, and I can even, again, cut it a bit long. So here's the fun part that I figured out last night. When I was working on this window, I wasn't able to hold this piece in place and go and mark over here and check back and forth. It was always dropping. So here's the easy fix for that. The easy fix for that is just a bit of blue tape. So we come over here, we make sure this corner is right in line with this line as best as we can do. The height kind of matters, but isn't super duper important. And we get that nice and taped on there. And then over on this side, we get the height lined up and we can mark that exact length. This tape comes off. I can take this downstairs and get that one cut. But before I go downstairs, I'll just make sure that I've got all of these marked. That's pretty good, so that I only have to make one more trip to the miter saw to get these cut. Now for these side pieces, they're short enough that I can just hold them in place, but if they were much longer, I would make sure to tape them on one end before trying to mark. And I will make all my marks based off the same part of the window. And that way they will be as close to all exactly the same as I can make them. If I marked one here and then one over there, might end up a little bit different, and that makes it harder to get your corners nice and tight. All right, with these 4 marks, I can head back downstairs and cut them off again. When I'm working, I'll make a little bit of a test cut to see how close I am, and then I will just use my thumb, use my pinky, just creep it up just a little bit. And once it's good and in exactly the right spot, I finish the cut. And those are about perfect. So we just need to get the other 2. Let's flip them around. I think one might be just a touch longer. It's easier to check on the flat bottoms than on the rounded edges if one is longer or not. And we have just a tiny little bit here, so I'm going to take this one back and just shave off a little. You'll see probably on YouTube a lot where people are just like, hey, you make this measurement and you mark and you cut this measurement and then it's easy and it's quick. But the truth of good trim work is taking the time to check things and fuss things. Like this one is clearly a little bit longer and that needs to be adjusted. You can do things quick and dirty and rely on caulk and spackle to fix all your mistakes. Or you can practice your skill, practice your craft, try to get a little bit better at things. So there, we are perfect. And there, we are pretty perfect. Now I've got my 1-inch brads in here, and we can start to nail these up. The first one is really easy. You just put it on a mark, one way or the other. To make it a little bit easier, I'm just gonna hold this end up. So I still have a little bit of left and right play with this, with the tape on. I can make that exactly where I want it to be. And I can come over here and get that exactly at the line. Now you might notice that I'm not exactly at this line anymore, and that's okay. I'm off by maybe 1/4 of a millimeter. And what's going to be more important is that I get an even amount all the way up rather than that this is exactly perfectly the same as over here. Here we come to, why do I put a mark in the middle? Sometimes your windows are not exactly flat, sometimes your trim is not exactly flat. So to maintain the same reveal all the way along, I have to push this up a little bit and nail in on there. Then I can fill in the nailing gaps. So this is a little bit of a cheat that I have stolen from other YouTubers. It's Crazy Glue and a CA accelerant. I like to use this because what it lets me do is connect the miters perfectly, and then I can still flex the board around a little bit instead of trying to say, okay, well, we'll line that up perfectly and then I've got a gap. So it's a little bit of a cheat when things aren't exactly perfect. But with any luck, we'll be able to see that this makes a big difference. So for comparison, having these miters lined up best I can, we are quite noticeably off at the top here. That's probably about 1/8 of an inch. It's gonna be tough to get that to pull in because that's the kind of gap it would leave me with otherwise, and a lot of people would just say, whatever, we'll fill that. But we're gonna try to glue it first, and then hopefully I won't need to fill it. It'll still need to be sanded, but hopefully not filled. Oh, that was a lot. Let's just spread that out. Kind of get 1.5 chances to get this lined up perfect, so be careful with it. And that's what I mean. It doesn't immediately set up, but it is very, very quick. And just hold that there for a second. And I will get a nail in here. Now this nail in here will keep it from sliding away. I'm not gonna go and wedge this in yet. I'm gonna let this have a little bit more time to cure while I do the same for this end. So I'm gonna check and see how much overlap I have with this line here, and we've got a little bit of the same going on. And what that tells me is I probably didn't do a perfect job in getting the miter saw squared out at a perfect 45. So we might have to adjust that a little bit later. And if I was going to be doing a lot more windows like this here today, I would make a really big fuss. I have one more window I have to do, and it is a fairly prominent window, so I will try to recheck it. But for right now, for this window, for its location, this will be okay. Hopefully this will be okay. There we go. Nice and smooth. Right on that corner there. And we can get that held in. And I can leave that alone. And I'm gonna open a window because the zip kicker is kind of smelly. This should have had enough time to cure, so I'm gonna come back over here and we're just gonna squeeze that over a little bit. And you can see that even while I'm squeezing it here, I'm not getting any separation there. So the glue is doing its job perfectly. Beautiful. And what's really important right now is I'm going to leave this one flexible. You might think I would come along and say, okay, we'll get this one in place because we know this is straight and it's the same length as this and it's the same length there, but we're not gonna do that. What we're gonna do is get both ends of this glued into both ends of that at the same time. So I put my kicker on the board that I'm putting in because then I'm not spraying the walls. Then I can get the glue on the pieces that it's going onto. And what we do is we go and we get this one in first. And make sure that is as perfect as we can get it. Which needs to be just a little bit higher. There we go. And you can see we have definitely not the perfect angle here for these 45s. Because that's too high and that's too wide. And we can nail this one in, hop over to this side, and now we can pull both of these together. And by pulling these both together, we can make sure we get as perfect a corner in here as possible, rather than setting one and hoping that the other one matches up properly. Now, I can nail these both in, and they won't go anywhere. I just want to get a bit of paper towel and get this little bit of overglue out. Now, all of these joints will still need filling and sanding, but you can see what a benefit it had doing it this way over trying to build it on a table or trying to build it in place and just nailing them all in and making them all straight. Now all I have to do is come along and finish the nailing. Once I'm done attaching to the jamb itself, I'll get my longer 2-inch nails in and I'll try to get it attached better to the wall. And you can see there's a little bit of gap I'm gonna try to close up here. Better. All right, now sometimes, especially below the window, if you don't know exactly where the studs are, you can get a nail in and it doesn't do anything because you're just hitting drywall. So we're gonna try to get the stud here. And it looks like we did. And we can go 16 off of that and try to get the other studs. That should be around here. Looks good. And the other one should be there. And that looks nice and tight. So there we go. That's Moose's quick and easy how to trim a window the best way he knows how. And now we can stop YouTubing for a bit. Yay! Plus I got a window done. So it's like 2 birds with one net, because don't throw stones at birds. Okay, I promised you a quick example about how to build a tool if you don't have the fancy metal tool that I had in the start of the video. We're going to use a little bit of scrap trim. We will grab 2 little pieces of this trim. And now that the vacuum's done, we can say, all right, whatever reveal we want to have, let's say we want a 1/4 inch reveal, something where my pencil will actually make a mark. About there, that's about a 1/4 inch. The reason we're using these trim bits is because they are generally, over a short distance, extremely straight. So if I line up like that, those edges, with the inside corners in, you can see that this is going to be very, very straight. We'll come along here, get a couple of nails in the middle here. And yes, I was being very aware of where my fingers were when we were doing that. And then we're actually gonna have to buzz these guys out because they're a little bit long and my nail is set too long. Now, you don't have to use this length of nail. You can use a shorter length if you have it. You can use a screw, you can use a glue and a clamp and hold it for a long time. Whatever you want to do. I just have to make sure that these come off or this won't work. Okay, now we've got our little mock-up of our jam here. So if I come along here, we take my reveal distance here and we say this is 1/8, and we can mark this and we can mark this. But we run into a little bit of a problem. We can't get the corner. So what you do is you go back to your miter saw. This is a little bit sketchy, but it will actually work. We're going to cut a little bit more than the reveal off the back piece on both sides. This is why we did the lining up first instead of trying to trim this to be a smaller size first. And we're only going to cut down so that we just get barely through this back piece. Thank you, LiDAR. So now we've got some unknown amount hanging off this edge here. These don't matter. We still have my 1/4 inch reveal here. Now, you can see that because my cutoff here is bigger than my reveal, I can place my reveal edge down and overlap it past the line. So I can come along here and mark that corner all the way over. Then when I turn this, same with this side, we are past my reveal line. And now I can get the corner that I want. That will work for any predefined amount of reveal that you want. It will always be the same. This lets you get it lined up very, very straight, at least as straight as my miter saw is square, which is, as we've already seen, fairly questionable. But over this sort of a distance, it's square enough. And if you can try to make a point of saying, all right, every single time I'm going to mark at that end. And if we're imagining that we're in the middle of my window here, instead of saying, okay, I'll go mark over here, because my miter saw isn't square, we'll say I'll always mark on the left side and come up the side. I'll always mark on that side. This will always be the same all the way around. So there you go. Easy tool made out of scraps and some leftover nails. Why wouldn't you use a speed square? This is a good question. You have a measuring tape, you have a speed square. Why don't you use one of those? Because a speed square will sometimes, not always, have notches in here. These are usually on the quarters and the halves. But if you're gonna say, well, I can use my speed square and I can get I can get my 1/8 there every time. If you are confident you can get your 1/8 or your 1/4 there every time and it's exactly the same every time, great. It will still be slower to say, okay, I gotta get this lined up, I gotta get my pencil lined up, I gotta make my mark. That will always be slower than coming along and saying, all right, there's my mark, there's my mark. And the same goes for a measuring tape. If you wanna come along and say, all right, well, I can just measure out, here's my 1/4 mark, and then measure out, it's the same thing. You're measuring every time and you're gonna have some variation. It might not be much, but it'll be different.